How turbocharged engines work, a presentation by me. We often hear the word turbo used to describe something that is fast and powerful, but what does that actually mean? Turbocharging is a way to make an engine produce more power without increasing its size. This is often used today to give cars more fuel economy by giving them a smaller engine with turbocharging, which has the benefits of the smaller engine as well as the power of a larger engine thanks to the turbocharger. But to understand how a turbocharged engine works, we first have to understand how one that isn't works. So we start with this cutaway view of the engine cylinder, which has the piston at the top of its stroke. And as the crankshaft, which is the thing at the bottom, rotates, the piston is drawn down and the intake valve opens. When the valve opens, air enters as it is being sucked in by the moving piston because the volume of the chamber is expanding. Additionally, sometimes the air has fuel mixed into it, or the fuel is sprayed in during this phase, depending on what type of injection system a specific motor has. The intake valve then closes and the rotating crankshaft then pushes the piston back up. Because both the valves are closed, the mixture of fuel and air is compressed, which readies it for combustion. When the piston is at the top of its stroke, the spark plug, which is the small thing at the top, creates a tiny spark which ignites the fuel and air mixture, creating combustion. This explosion is so powerful that it forces the piston down and is the driving force of what powers the engine. As the crankshaft rotates, it goes all the way around again, and after the combustion, the remaining exhaust must be vented. So the exhaust valve opens, and as the piston rises, it pushes out all the remaining exhaust. This repeated cycle is what powers the car because the rotation at the crankshaft is eventually translated to rotation at the wheels through the gearbox. But where does turbocharging play into this? Well, the engine can only combust fuel that is at a specific ratio of fuel to air because there needs to be air for the fuel to ignite. But since in the intake stroke, the engine can only suck in so much air because of its size, there's a limited amount of fuel it can combust, and that amount of fuel equates to how much power the engine can make. So turbocharging is also known as forced induction because it pushes more air into the engine rather than having the engine suck it in. This allows for more fuel to be added to maintain the right ratio of fuel and air, allowing for more power to be created. How exactly does this process work? Well, this is what a turbocharger approximately looks like. This is what a real one looks like for reference. But inside, here we have this cutaway view. The red arrows indicate the exhaust that is being pushed out during the exhaust stroke. Remember from back when after the fuel has combusted. And because it's hot and has a lot of energy, as it enters the turbine, which looks kind of like a snail, it rotates the turbine, which is attached to the rotor, and since that rotor is also attached to compressor, the compressor is rotating the same as the turbine, which is being powered by the exhaust. And as the compressor rotates, it pulls in outside air and compresses it, and eventually sends that into the intake of the engine, allowing for more air to go into the cylinder. After the exhaust goes through the turbine, it exits the engine and it goes out the exhaust pipe at the back of the car. Here's a cutaway view that isn't expanded like the other one, where you can see the rotor and how it's attached to both the turbine and the compressor. This is all very simplified, however, because there are various measures including blow-off valves and wastegates to control the precise amount of pressure entering the engine to get the required amount of power as well as to make the engine not blow up, which could happen when you're adding too much pressure inside a very quickly moving cylinder. As the pressure in the intake increases, as does the temperature. But hot air is less dense than cold air, and so is less ideal for combustion because the expanded nature of hot air means there's less of it to mix with the fuel. So almost every turbocharged engine today has an intercooler which is mounted in the front of the car. The blue arrows you see represent the cold air going through the grill and across the intercooler, which cools the intake charge which is inside of it. This allows for a more reliable and consistent and powerful boost of air into the engine. So what have we learned? Turbocharging allows engines to be more powerful because it adds more air to the engine intake, and by maintaining the ratio of air and fuel, more fuel can be added as well, creating more power. Some further questions or things to explore, if I would have more of an in-depth research, would be how things like twin turbocharging as well as sequential and twin scroll charging works, because those are new technologies that are being employed more and more to allow for even smaller engines to be more powerful and more efficient. And that's the main goal that automakers use turbocharging to reach today. Thank you for watching my presentation.